Ready, set, art. So I'm going to show how to paint a pumpkin pie in the style of Wayne Thiebaud. So Wayne Thiebaud was a pop artist made first popular in the 1960s, and he did these amazing cakes and donuts and other desserts and also pie. So I want to do the same style but with pumpkin pie. So in this one, you see we kind of have this colorful background, and you're able to see all the different brush strokes, and that's typical of his style. The other thing is we have this nice plate, and there's generally a blue shadow in his work. A blue shadow. Right? Alright, and then we're going to add some whipped cream. Let's get started. So I have my cardstock here, and I put like 3 sheets of paper towel underneath. That way when I paint, it just goes onto the paper towel. I have a couple plates of paint. Type of paints I'm using are just the kind you find at Walmart, right? These little sets. Okay. And now we can get started. Now I did notice when I did this one, this purple here, it's interesting that you have to end up doing a purple shadow here. So my final piece, I'm actually going to do a blue shadow instead. So I'm going to reverse the colors. I'm going to have a blue bottom here and a different color up here. And you could switch your colors and do what you want. I'm trying to make it easier by having a blue background and easier for this project. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to start with my turquoise. Put some paint over here. Alright. I also want a darker blue to play with. Put that over here. I have over here in a palette some white. And I also have some green as an alternative choice color. Here's the size brush I'm using. I'm going to start by going about 2/3 down. So that's about 2/3. 2/3 for our table. And I want a lot of paint. A lot of paint. That way we don't have to put so many layers on, right? And it actually helps that if you put this on pretty thick, then you can apply the other colors and it'll still stay wet while you're applying the other colors, since we put it on so thick, and then we're able to blend the other colors. Alright, so that looks good. I'm going to take some of my darker blue, streak that in, and then I rinse out my brush, dry it out. That's super important if you want these blends to work without, you know, because if you end up not drying out your brush and you end up adding water to the paint right here, and it thins it out. We don't want to be thin. We don't want it thinned out. So I just rinsed out the brush and dried it out. I'm going to add my alternative choice green. Could you do a green background instead? Sure. A red background? Sure. You're essentially putting down a medium value, a dark value on an alternative choice. Dry out your brush. And then we're going to go in with some white. See, right now this green might be too striking, right? But that's okay, because we're going to use some white. Alright, so I took some white, and I'm blending right on top. Right on top. I like this. If it's too much, you just go back with that turquoise that you initially used, and you can go back on top of that. Now that looks pretty good to me. Now, earlier I used this purple to do the other colors, but I ran out, so I'm going to use the pink instead. And that's okay. Sometimes you run out of colors and you think, what other colors can I do? Well, just put it up next to the other colors, and if it looks good next to it, then that's good to go. Alright, I'm going to use this a lot of pink. And I'm overlapping a little bit, that's okay. Then I kind of go back and straighten that out. More pink. Okay. Almost there. This is the part that takes the longest, I know. Alright, and then I'm going to use some white. Rinse out my brush. Dry out my brush. Right, because we don't want to add water to our surface here. Now, one color I think I might add is a little bit of that teal. Right? Dry out my brush, blend back and forth. Okay. Now if you had purple, could you use purple in here? Sure, absolutely. So I'm going to move this one to the side and let it dry. I need to let it dry. I already have one ready to go. So this is the one with the purple, right? So you can change your colors up. The next part is making our plate. So I'm going to use that white again, dry out my brush. I need a good amount of white, kind of plop it in the middle, and I'm going to create something called an ellipse. So this top part kind of looks like an egg, right? And now I can actually curve really well going this way. So when you do this ellipse, it really needs to be the same ellipse here. You don't want to do this. See how it looks like it's straightened on the bottom? Well, plates don't look like that. Plates are circles, and when we look at it from an angle, it becomes an ellipse. So this curve here needs to mimic down here. If you have a hard time turning your hand this way, you could always flip it over, white paint, and create that same curve, if that makes it easier, which for most people it does, and that's why I'm going to keep finishing this way. Fill this in. Alright. Almost there. Now plates have something called a lip, right? It has this indentation here. I'm going to take a little bit of my blue and I'm going to add this little curve in. Remember, I'm not straightening it out. I want to make sure it still stays in a curve. And then I kind of dash it in this way. Okay. I'm going to rinse out my brush, dry out my brush, go back to the white, and I'm going to go right over it. Okay. And the thing about the Wayne Thiebaud technique is that it's nice that it kind of creates a streaky kind of brush stroke type look. That's what you're going for. If you're thinking, oh no, I don't know if I like that, it's fine. You kind of want to see every brush stroke. I dried out my brush again and I rinsed it so I can keep blending well. You could leave it like that, or if you think it needs more white, then you go back in with more white and finish it up. Alright, so that would need to dry, and that means I'm ready to do the next part, which is adding our pumpkin. So let me just dry this a little bit. Normally you would wait for it to dry, right? You'd wait for it to dry. Let me use this one. Alright, so you can see this is one where I had a purple on the bottom, but it's the same idea. Dry out my brush. This time I'm going to use this color. It's a gold color. If you don't have that, if you have like yellow and orange, that works too. Yellow and orange works well. Alright. And the first thing I want to do is create the angle of the pie, the back part. It's angled there, you know how pie tins are. Straight this way, straight up this time, and like this, like a trapezoid. Okay, fill that in. Now I'm going to angle this way and then this way to create the triangular top. Right now it's very thin. I'm ready to kind of just dab some white, about that much, and put that there. If your yellow and orange does not come quite on the pumpkin side, you could always add a little brown. Alright, so now I have this part here. I feel like it needs another layer. And I'm going to add a tiny bit of white. Again, we don't mind kind of this line work thing happening. But we do want to create our crust. So I have this color, but I also want to take this blue and add a little red to it to make a purple, a darker purple. Why? Because on the color scales, on the color wheel, when you mix purple with yellow or a gold, it creates its shadow, the shadow tone that we need. I don't want to use black. Okay, so I'm going to take this blue, I'm going to add a little red until I get to a purple tone. That looks good. I'm going to rinse out my brush, dry out my brush. I'm going to take a little yellow to the side, a little purple. See, there's my yellow and purple, and I'm mixing it a little bit to make it darker. Just a little. bit. And if it's too dark, then just go back to your gold. All right, and then I'm going to create the base. Oops, so that was too much purple, right? Maybe it needs a little more red. A little more red. Creating that red-violet. Okay, let's try it again. See, artists make mistakes, no big deal. Oh, that's much better. Okay, so I'm going to create this little crust going up, and then here, and then I kind of go off to the side, right? We know how the crust is, we like that. Rinse out my brush, dry out my brush, go straight the yellow this time, dash it in, rinse out my brush, add some white maybe, creating that crust we like, dry out my brush, and then kind of blend it down. Alright, so that needs to dry so we can finally do the whipped cream and the shadow. So I'm going to put that there. I know this is a long video, but it's a lot of steps with painting. Alright, so here's my pie. I'm ready to do a shadow. I'm going to use this blue with some white. So just a little bit, not too much. And I'm going to go right underneath, just a little bit, some right here, kind of dash it out a little bit. And you're thinking, that's really strong shadow. It is, but we're going to go in with some white now. Dry out my brush. Okay. And I'm kind of going underneath and blending to the edge. And if it's starting to blend too much, rinse out your brush. Dry out your brush and gently blend it back. I'm going to do the white over here. See how I went from the outside in. Now this shadow is going to go all the way over here. All the way over here. Dry out my brush again. When it starts to look a little streaky, you gotta take a moment and stop what you're doing. Okay. That looks pretty good to me. But now we have to add the shadow under the plate. So this plate had that turquoise and that blue. So I'm going to mix some of that blue with the other blue. And I'm going to go underneath my plate. Just like that. I'm going to blend it out. I know you're thinking, oh no, that's too strong. I understand. Hold on. I'm going to dry out my brush. Use the original turquoise that we had. Blend from over here. Right? Dry out my brush. Kind of start blending. Streaking it out if I have to. Going closer to the plate. Right? Dry out my brush. Blending it out. Sorry if my hand's in front of there. Looks like we have it. So we're letting that part dry, and then we can finally move on to our whipped cream. I'm going to use a smaller brush now. I'm going to kind of use a whole glob of white. Kind of pillow it on there. Not like a cone, because then it doesn't quite look right, but more like that, which I realize it ends up looking like something else at that point, but you know, that's fine. I'm going to use a tiny bit of pink, just a little bit, kind of dashing in. Rinse out my brush, dry out my brush, kind of blend right on top of that, so it's just blending, and then finally a little bit of blue. A little bit of blue acting as a shadow. Right? And if it's too strong, dry out your brush, gently blend. Alright, looks like we got a pumpkin pie in the style of Wayne Thiebaud. I did a blue background here instead with the purple top. That way it was easier to do the shadow here. Although if you did have this purple here instead, I would have had to use my purple here and create a shadow going this way. But like I said, I ran out of this color, which I would have blended back this way to help finish the piece. Okay, so there we go. That's the original one that I showed, and then here is the one that we painted in real time. Thank you and good luck.